The piercing sound of police sirens shattered the quiet luxury of Beverly Hills on the night of March 15th, 2022. Red and blue lights bounced off the glass facades of multi-million-dollar mansions, rousing curious neighbors who peeked through velvet curtains, wondering what could have disturbed their exclusive enclave. At the center of the chaos stood a striking Mediterranean-style estate nestled at the end of North Alpine Drive, the residence of Calvin Mara. At that moment, no one knew this night would unravel one of the most explosive scandals ever to rock Los Angeles' Indian expatriate community. Calvin Mara had long been held as the embodiment of the American dream, a tale of immigrant success recited proudly by parents to inspire their children. At 50, he was a towering figure in the LA business world, distinguished, poised, always seen in custom-made suits that whispered quiet wealth. His story began like many others. He arrived from Mumbai in 1998 with an engineering degree, big dreams, and a young bride. But where others struggled, Calvin soared. Over 25 years, he built Tech Vision Solutions from a modest consulting firm into a $500 million tech empire. The company specialized in artificial intelligence and data analytics, riding the tech boom with expert timing and Calvin's uncanny knack for predicting industry trends. His rise through the corporate ranks was meteoric, starting as a project manager, rising to CEO, and transforming his living situation from a small apartment in San Fernando Valley to a $30 million Beverly Hills mansion. His marriage to Elena had been arranged in India, but anyone who saw them together would have thought it was a love story. At 47, Elena remained radiantly elegant, the perfect partner to Calvin's prestige. She managed their home with poise and raised 3 accomplished children who were reflections of their parents' dedication. Their eldest son, Ryan, 23, had already graduated from Stanford and was carving his own path in the tech world. Their daughter, Paige, 19, was pre-law, determined and focused. The youngest, Maddie, just 16, was still in high school, but already a top academic performer. The birth of their first grandchild, little Aiden, seemed to complete the family portrait. Photos from the naming ceremony 2 months prior showed Calvin beaming, surrounded by family and the creme de la creme of LA's Indian society. While the pandemic disrupted many businesses, Tech Vision Solutions thrived under Calvin's leadership. His early push for digital transformation had perfectly positioned the company for the remote work revolution. Between 2020 and 2021, the company's stock price doubled, significantly boosting Calvin's personal wealth and his influence in both the business and cultural communities. In LA's tight-knit Indian diaspora, the Maras weren't just successful, they were revered. Calvin sat on the board of the India Cultural Center, donated generously to temples and charities, and regularly mentored up-and-coming entrepreneurs. During Diwali, the Mara estate welcomed hundreds of guests to celebrations that became the highlight of the community's social calendar. Events meticulously hosted by Elena, filled with tradition, elegance, and opulence. They seemed to represent everything the expatriate community held dear: success, family, cultural heritage, and generous contributions to their adopted homeland. Calvin's reach extended far beyond his ethnic circle. He served on multiple corporate boards, played weekend golf with state senators, and was a familiar face at Hollywood fundraisers. To the outside world, he was a model immigrant, a corporate visionary, and a family man with impeccable values. But that night in March would mark the beginning of a very different story. The walls of Calvin Mara's office gleamed with plaques and accolades, each one a testament to decades of discipline and ambition. Ernst and Young Entrepreneur of the Year, the Governor's Award for Excellence in Business, the India Global Leadership Award. Every honor added another layer to his reputation as a businessman of unshakable character and sharp judgment. The Mara residence itself was a living monument to that success. A sprawling 15,000-square-foot Mediterranean estate perched high above Beverly Hills. Its manicured gardens, private tennis court, and sweeping views that stretched from downtown Los Angeles to the Pacific Ocean made it a regular feature in luxury design magazines. Even during California's strictest lockdowns, the property served as a private paradise for the family. The garage was a curated showroom of high-end automobiles, each handpicked with the same obsessive attention to detail that defined Calvin's professional life. It was a home that hosted charity galas, community fundraisers, and exclusive soirees, with Calvin and his wife, Elena, playing the perfect host to Los Angeles' elite. But on the night of March 15th, 2022, with police sirens screaming through the hills and red and blue lights casting distorted shadows on imported stone columns, the illusion of perfection began to crack. The responding officers, accustomed to calls about marital disputes, intoxicated teens, or mental health crises behind gated walls, had no idea they were about to walk into a far more sinister narrative, a story of obsession, betrayal, and irreversible consequences. A story that would force an entire community to re-examine its definition of success and the quiet sacrifices made in its name. 3 months earlier, inside the mirrored towers of Tech Vision Solutions in downtown Los Angeles, Calvin had made a decision that would set this chain of events in motion. It was a decision rooted not in impulse, but in ego, a decision that would eventually dismantle everything he had spent the last 25 years building. At the start of 2022, no one could have imagined that Calvin Mara, one of Los Angeles' most admired CEOs, would soon become the central figure in a scandal that would shake not only the tech industry, but also the Indian-American community to its core. His fall from grace would become a cautionary tale about power, temptation, and the dangerous price of secrecy in an age where privacy was rapidly becoming obsolete. It all began in January 2022 during Tech Vision Solutions' annual partner summit. That's where Calvin first met Lauren West, a striking, sharp-minded 27-year-old MBA graduate from the USC Marshall School of Business. Recently appointed marketing director at DataStream Analytics, one of Tech Vision's key partners, Lauren was already turning heads in a field still dominated by older men. Her confidence was disarming. Her presentation on AI-driven marketing strategies was bold, innovative, and delivered with a conviction that reminded Calvin of his own early career, when he had nothing to lose and everything to prove. She was tall, poised, with dark hair and an unapologetically assertive presence. But it wasn't just her appearance that caught Calvin's eye. It was her intellect. Her ideas for integrating artificial intelligence into adaptive marketing systems aligned seamlessly with Tech Vision's strategic direction. After the presentation, Calvin approached her. "Your understanding of AI integration is quite impressive," he said, his voice warm but firm, carrying the gravitas of someone twice her age. "I'd love to discuss how we might apply your ideas across our partner network." Flattered by the attention of such a renowned industry figure, Lauren eagerly accepted. What began as a single follow-up conversation turned into regular monthly meetings. Those meetings quickly became weekly, and before long, the discussions, held in Calvin's corner office on the 47th floor with the Los Angeles skyline spread beneath them, moved far beyond business. Calvin began to share personal stories, the grind of immigrant life, the cultural clashes, the business deals that almost failed. Lauren listened, engaged. Then she, too, opened up about her ambitions, her anxieties, and the pressure she felt to make a name for herself in a world still skeptical of young women with power. It was the beginning of something neither of them fully understood, and something neither of them would be able to stop. The age gap between them added a complex layer to their evolving dynamic. For Lauren, Calvin represented everything she aspired to achieve: success, respect, and influence. For Calvin, Lauren's youth and enthusiasm stirred emotions he had long buried. Her presence made him feel invigorated, valued, and understood in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The 23-year difference in age, which should have been a natural barrier, instead became a dangerously alluring force driving their growing attraction. By March 2023, their professional relationship had taken on an unmistakable undercurrent of tension. Lingering glances, brief touches, and conversations that veered far from business topics. All were subtle signals of a desire neither dared to acknowledge openly. The guise of mentorship became a convenient mask. Calvin would invite Lauren to industry events, proudly introducing her to influential figures in the tech world. "She's a rising star," he would say, maintaining the illusion of a seasoned executive guiding a promising protege. The first significant line was crossed during a late-night meeting in April. They were reviewing marketing strategies when the conversation shifted from business to something far more personal. "Sometimes I feel trapped by my own success," Calvin admitted, his usual confident tone faltering. "Like I'm constantly playing a role everyone expects me to play." Lauren's response, a gentle touch on his arm and an empathetic look, sparked something irreversible. Their first kiss happened in Calvin's office, silhouetted against the Los Angeles sunset. It was a moment of weakness, but it unleashed a chain of events that would spiral far beyond their control. The following day, guilt battled desire, but the pull between them remained undeniable. Calvin, aware of the stakes, began constructing an intricate system to hide their relationship. The first step was the creation of a shell company, presented on paper as a business development venture. Through this entity, he leased a luxury two-bedroom apartment in a high-security building just 10 minutes from his office. It became their private retreat. Every aspect was carefully orchestrated. The lease was signed under the company's name. Utilities were paid through corporate accounts. A sophisticated security system ensured discreet entry and exit. To protect their digital privacy, Calvin purchased burner phones, created separate email addresses, and developed a strict communication protocol. They never texted on their regular phones, never emailed from work accounts, and never appear together in places where they might be seen. These elaborate measures reflected not only Calvin's understanding of technology, but also the high stakes they faced. Their meetings settled into a routine, late-night strategy sessions that blurred into dinners, business trips that coincidentally overlapped, and conference appearances that allowed for brief moments stolen in shadowed corners. Lauren's role at DataStream Analytics offered a plausible reason for frequent interactions with TechVision CEO. To outsiders, it was a classic mentorship, an ambitious young professional being guided by a seasoned executive. But beneath the surface, their bond intensified rapidly. Calvin found himself increasingly captivated by Lauren's world. Her energy, optimism, and zest for life reignited a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in decades. With her, he could imagine an alternate version of himself, free from the rigid expectations of family, reputation, and community. For Lauren, the relationship offered more than emotional connection. Calvin's influence opened doors. His advice propelled her career. His wealth exposed her to a lifestyle she had only seen in dreams. The power dynamic was undeniably complicated. Calvin held the advantages of age, authority, and resources. But Lauren held her own kind of power, the sway of youth and the silent leverage of exposure. As summer approached, the lines blurred further. Lauren began to demand more time, more attention, more acknowledgement, even if only behind closed doors. Calvin, now emotionally entangled and increasingly distant from his once-ordered life, began taking greater risks. He would slip away from family events to meet her. He invented last-minute business emergencies during major celebrations, and he crafted elaborate lies to explain his unexplained absences. The double life he had created was becoming harder to manage and impossible to control. The strain began to surface in subtle but unmistakable ways. Calvin's once flawless attention to detail started slipping. During board meetings, he appeared distracted, often glancing at his phone. At family dinners, he would check messages obsessively or excuse himself for hours without explanation. Those closest to him noticed the changes, but they attributed them to work stress or the natural pressures that came with being a high-powered executive. By December 2023, the affair between Calvin Mara and Lauren West had evolved into a tangled web of secrets, desire, and escalating risk. Their downtown apartment, once a carefully maintained hideaway, had become filled with traces of their relationship. Her clothes hung in the closet. Framed photos of them together adorned the shelves. Gifts he had given her, many of them extravagant, were now scattered throughout the space. Despite the meticulous precautions they had taken early on, the boundaries of their secret world had begun to blur. They had grown comfortable, perhaps even careless. What neither realized was that the walls of their deception were already beginning to crack. Not from a dramatic discovery, but from the small inconsistencies that inevitably slip through when someone lives a double life. Questionable bank transactions, fragments of security footage, unexpected sightings. Tiny puzzle pieces that, when assembled, would eventually shatter more than just reputations. As the year drew to a close, Calvin, once the revered patriarch and business magnate, was living a parallel existence that clashed sharply with his public persona. The decisions he had made during these clandestine months would soon trigger consequences that not only destroyed his polished image, but would irreversibly alter the lives of everyone around him. By January 2024, the carefully constructed compartments of Calvin's life were collapsing. What had begun as a secret indulgence had spiraled into a full-blown obsession, one so consuming it threatened everything he had built over a quarter century. The first major crack came with an impulsive trip to Paris. Calvin disguised it as a business conference. In reality, it was a romantic escape. He spared no expense, booking the presidential suite at the Four Seasons George V, gifting Lauren a $50,000 Van Cleef and Arpels necklace, and arranging private, after-hours tours of the city's most exclusive museums. For Lauren, it was a dream come true. For Calvin, it was an intoxicating break from the crushing weight of responsibility. The Paris trip set a dangerous precedent. Extravagant gestures became routine. Lavish shopping sprees on Rodeo Drive followed. Lauren amassed an enviable collection of designer bags, fine jewelry, and couture fashion, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Each indulgence required more elaborate financial maneuvering to remain hidden. Calvin began channeling company funds through a growing network of shell corporations, starting in Delaware and expanding to the Cayman Islands and Singapore. His financial web grew increasingly complex. He even established an offshore trust in the British Virgin Islands, allegedly for business expansion, but in truth, it was a vault for personal expenses. To support this double life, Calvin diverted portions of TechVision's international contracts through these shadow entities. His company's CFO noticed irregularities in the books and raised concerns, but Calvin's status allowed him to deflect suspicion with ease. Lauren's influence over Calvin now extended far beyond the material. At 50, he grew increasingly self-conscious about their age difference. He hired a personal trainer, upgraded his wardrobe, and even considered hair restoration treatments. He spent hours at the gym and returned home carrying bags of designer clothes better suited to someone half his age. His family began noticing the obsession. The once immaculate image of a devoted husband and father began to crumble. Calvin missed his grandson Aiden's first birthday, citing a last-minute board meeting in Singapore. His eldest son Ryan, working in TechVision's finance department, started noticing troubling discrepancies in international wire transfers. The facade was cracking, and the fall was coming. When Ryan tried to raise concerns about financial discrepancies, Calvin reacted with uncharacteristic anger. Instead of offering an explanation, he warned his son to focus on your own responsibilities. The sharp tone stunned Ryan. It was not the father he knew. Elena, once the confident hostess of Silicon Beach's most exclusive gatherings, began withdrawing into herself. Calvin's constant absences and emotional detachment had taken a visible toll. She started seeing a therapist, although she told friends it was for meditation guidance. Those closest to her noticed her declining participation in community events. At temple gatherings, her bright smile had faded into forced pleasantries. Her once vibrant presence was now marked by silence and solitude inside the grand, yet increasingly cold, Beverly Hills mansion. Meanwhile, their youngest daughter Maddie, always the most emotionally perceptive of the three children, began to rebel in response to the shifting dynamics at home. Once a high-achieving student, she started sneaking out of parties, her grades plummeted, and she was suspended from school for cheating on an exam. When confronted, she lashed out at Calvin. "You never hear anyway. Why do you care what I do?" Her words cut deeper than he let on. Within the tight-knit Indian community of Los Angeles, where appearances meant everything, the whispers began. Elders who had once praised Calvin as a shining example of balancing Indian values with American success now exchanged quiet, concerned glances at cultural gatherings. His absences at important events, his distracted demeanor when he did attend, and Elena's evident unhappiness did not go unnoticed. By March, Lauren's demands on Calvin's time and resources had escalated. She began pushing for more attention, more acknowledgement, more of a future. The downtown apartment, once their hidden sanctuary, no longer satisfied her. She wanted visibility, legitimacy, and a place in his real life. What had once made her irresistible, her energy, her youth, now came at a cost. Impatience, emotional volatility, and growing pressure for commitment. Calvin responded the only way he knew how, with money. He created a private investment account in Lauren's name, funded through a complex maze of offshore transactions. He whispered promises of leaving Tech Vision behind, of starting a new life together, promises he had no intention or ability to keep. The financial deception necessary to support these illusions became increasingly reckless. He began diverting company resources to cover personal expenses, justifying each move as a temporary fix. The consequences of this double life began to bleed into his professional world. During a crucial merger negotiation, Calvin appeared distracted and underprepared. He nearly tanked a deal that would have secured a major acquisition for Tech Vision. Board members began to take notice. His erratic behavior in meetings, his obsessive phone checking, and occasional outbursts over minor issues caused unease. For the first time in years, the company's stock price, once rock solid, began to show signs of instability. Then came Paige's 19th birthday in April. Calvin arrived 3 hours late, missing the entire family dinner. He claimed he had been delayed by an urgent business meeting. But Ryan, who worked in the same executive circle, knew there had been no such meeting scheduled. The ensuing argument between Calvin and Elena, whispered in a corner to avoid disturbing guests, marked a silent breaking point in their marriage. Concerned by the turmoil, a group of respected community elders, led by businessman Raj Patel, requested a private meeting with Calvin at the temple. They voiced their observations, their growing fears about what was happening to the family. But Calvin's response shocked them, a defensive, angry outburst about personal boundaries and interference. By May, the unraveling accelerated. Lauren had become emotionally dependent, while Calvin's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Their once discreet relationship began leaving visible traces. They were seen together at a Malibu restaurant, his hand resting too long on her back. A junior executive spotted them entering the downtown apartment late one night. Rumors flooded Tech Vision's hallways. Calvin, once known for his meticulous business sense, was now engaged in elaborate financial deception. He created a network of fake consultancy contracts to funnel funds through shell companies. He manipulated board reports to conceal growing deficits. The once prudent CEO had become reckless and dangerously exposed. He began taking risks that would have horrified his younger self. Risks born from a desperate need to sustain a relationship that was systematically destroying everything he had built. As spring turned into summer, Calvin Mara's once structured life resembled a house of cards in an ever-growing windstorm. His family was splintering, his company stood on shaky ground, and his standing in the community was rapidly crumbling. Yet he seemed either unable or unwilling to pull back from the edge. The man who had once personified the immigrant success story was now being driven by impulses he could no longer control, spiraling toward a tragedy that would soon stun all of Los Angeles. December 2022 marked the beginning of Calvin Mara's undoing. No longer able to suppress her suspicions, Elena made a difficult but decisive choice. She hired private investigator Mark Rivera, a retired LAPD detective known for handling high-profile cases with quiet discretion. That decision would unravel the intricate web of lies her husband had spun over the past year. Rivera began with digital surveillance, methodically tracing Calvin's online activity. Despite Calvin's elaborate efforts to cover his tracks, the investigator found a pattern of deeply suspicious behavior. Credit card statements showed recurring charges at a luxury apartment complex in downtown Los Angeles. Security footage confirmed Calvin's frequent visits to the building, usually late at night, often accompanied by the same young woman, Lauren West. The investigation intensified when an anonymous email landed in Ryan's inbox at Tech Vision. A junior employee, disturbed by what they had witnessed, provided information about suspicious financial dealings and late-night meetings. Attached to the message were photos of Calvin and Lauren at upscale restaurants, their body language clearly suggesting a relationship that was far more personal than professional. Already concerned about inconsistencies in the company's finances, Ryan quietly began his own inquiry. With his access to internal records, he uncovered a troubling pattern. Millions of dollars funneled through shell corporations, disguised as business development expenditures, but ending up in untraceable offshore accounts. By mid-December, Rivera had assembled a comprehensive dossier. The findings were damning. Calvin was entangled in both a romantic affair and large-scale financial misconduct. The report included surveillance photos, financial documentation, and eyewitness statement from hotel and restaurant staff who had observed the two together. Then, on December 20th, everything unraveled. Lauren unexpectedly arrived at Calvin's office, visibly upset. Security cameras captured a heated confrontation between them in the parking garage. Hours later, Lauren sent an explosive email to Tech Vision's board of directors. In it, she revealed not only their affair, but also her pregnancy. She claimed Calvin had promised to leave his family and begin a new life with her. She came armed with proof, screenshots, receipts, and insider knowledge of financial irregularities. Her demands were explicit: public acknowledgement, financial security, and a clear commitment to their future. She asked for a $5 million trust fund for the unborn child and a senior executive position at Tech Vision. Calvin's carefully orchestrated double life came crashing down. On December 22nd, the board convened an emergency meeting. Calvin was suspended pending a full investigation. News of the scandal swept through the Indian community like wildfire, wiping out decades of hard-earned respect in a single blow. The final reckoning came on Christmas Eve. Traditionally a time of celebration in the Mehra household, the mood was anything but festive. With Elena's parents present, Ryan laid out the evidence for the entire family: emails, financial records, photographs. There was no more room for denial. The documentation was damning: photographs, financial records, hotel receipts, and, finally, Lauren's shocking pregnancy announcement. Elena's breakdown was devastating. 26 years of marriage, of building a life and family together, shattered in a single night. Her cries, torn between Hindi and English, echoed through their grand Beverly Hills mansion as she demanded answers Calvin couldn't give. Paige, their 19-year-old daughter, responded with seething fury. "You destroyed everything," she spat, her voice shaking with rage. "Every memory, every achievement, every family photo. It's all ruined now." She stormed out of the house that night and sought refuge at a friend's place. Maddie, just 16 and already wrestling with her own rebellious streak, stood at the edge of the chaos with bitter vindication. "At least my mistakes didn't wreck the entire family," she hissed before slamming her bedroom door, hard enough to knock a framed family photo off the wall, shattering the glass. The family confrontation turned into an all-night intervention. Elena's father, a respected retired judge from the Mumbai High Court, spoke softly but gravely about honor, duty, and the irreversible damage Calvin had done. Calvin's sister flew in from San Francisco, hoping to help mediate, but found herself torn between sibling loyalty and moral revulsion. The fallout spread quickly through the community. The temple board, where Calvin had once served as treasurer, demanded his immediate resignation. His photo was removed from the donor wall at the India Cultural Center. WhatsApp groups buzzed with rumors, speculation, and scathing condemnation. The story grew more outrageous with every retelling. A community council was convened on December 27th at the home of Raj Patel, the most senior and respected leader among them. 50 families gathered to discuss the implications of the scandal. The 5-hour meeting featured passionate debate over how to manage the public fallout while protecting the community's image. Behind closed doors, reputations were being rewritten. The financial stakes escalated. The SEC launched an inquiry into suspicious trading activity involving TechVision stock. Internal auditors discovered Calvin had funneled nearly $12 million through various shell companies, much of it hidden offshore and likely unrecoverable. Meanwhile, Lauren, sensing the tide turning, ramped up the pressure. Her legal team contacted TechVision's board directly, threatening to go public with extensive details of Calvin's misconduct, personal and professional, if her demands weren't met. The pregnancy, she warned, was just the beginning. Elena, supported by her children, moved out of the family's Beverly Hills estate and into a quiet private residence in Pacific Palisades. Her lawyer began preparing divorce papers, focusing especially on the financial misdeeds that had put the family's assets at risk. The same wealth that had once been a source of pride had now become a battlefield of forensic audits and legal claims. By the end of December, Calvin was utterly alone. His access to company accounts was cut off. His family refused to speak to him. His community, once eager to share his spotlight, now shunned him. Even his closest friends distanced themselves, afraid of the fallout. His deterioration was evident. Security cameras at TechVision captured him trying to enter the office building late one night. He appeared disoriented, aggressive, and unkempt. When security denied him entry, his behavior grew more erratic. The board responded by hiring private security around company headquarters. On New Year's Eve, while Los Angeles prepared for celebration, Calvin Maris sat alone in his downtown apartment, surrounded not by family or friends, but by a pile of legal notices, threatening letters, and a sonogram photo Lauren had once sent him. The man who had built his name as a paragon of success, discipline, and cultural pride now faced the crumbling ruins of his empire. The walls weren't just closing in, they were collapsing. And in the final hours of 2022, Calvin realized there would be no new beginning. But things escalated quickly. During a chance encounter with a former board member at a high-end restaurant, Calvin had to be physically restrained by staff after he aggressively approached his former colleague, shouting accusations and threats. Soon after, he began leaving rambling voicemails for other company executives, some laced with veiled threats, hinting they would pay for their perceived betrayal. Security footage from around Los Angeles captured a man clearly coming undone. Cameras showed Calvin arguing with parking attendants, causing scenes at exclusive restaurants, and, most disturbingly, standing outside his family's home in Pacific Palisades for hours until police were finally called to escort him away. The Indian community watched with a mix of horror, pity, and disbelief. Mental illness, a subject still taboo among many elders, began to surface in hushed conversations. Some older members recalled cautionary tales from back in India, successful men brought low by pride and obsession. But no one had ever witnessed anything like this, a public collapse that merged personal scandal, financial ruin, and cultural shame. By late January, Calvin's behavior grew even more erratic. He skipped critical meetings with his legal team, appeared disheveled at court proceedings, and all but disappeared from public life. It became clear he was living primarily out of the downtown apartment that had once been a secret romantic hideaway. Now, it resembled a bunker, windows covered in newspaper, locks added to every door, security cameras monitoring every entrance. Inside, documents were scattered across every surface like the evidence board of a crime drama. Lauren's final messages to Calvin, sent over the weekend of January 28th, revealed her growing concern. "You need help," she wrote. "This isn't just about us anymore. Think about your child." When he replied with paranoid accusations, suggesting she was in on a conspiracy against him, she reached out in desperation to his family. The final days of January revealed alarming activity. Security footage showed Calvin making several visits to his bank's safety deposit box. He was seen having hushed animated conversations with unknown individuals in parking structures. His online history revealed searches for countries without extradition treaties with the U.S. On January 30th, Calvin made a series of phone calls that would later draw intense scrutiny from investigators. He called his sister in San Francisco, leaving her a rambling voicemail about setting things right. He attempted to reach his children, but none of them answered. His final call was to Elena. It lasted nearly an hour. She later told authorities that Calvin sounded strangely calm, eerily at peace, which frightened her more than his earlier outbursts. The last confirmed sighting of Calvin was at 11:43 p.m. on January 30th. Security cameras recorded him entering the lobby of his downtown building, nodding silently to the guard, and taking the elevator to his floor. He walked down the hallway and disappeared into his unit. Over the next few hours, cameras showed several individuals entering and exiting the building. Due to the late hour and poor lighting, none could be definitively identified. A neighbor later reported hearing raised voices and what sounded like furniture being dragged around 2 a.m. Another resident, a nurse returning from a night shift, recalled seeing a dark-colored SUV speeding out of the parking garage just before 3 a.m. At 4:17 a.m. on January 31st, the final text message was sent from Calvin's phone. It was addressed to Lauren. "I never meant for any of this to happen. Take care of our child." When Lauren tried calling back moments later, the phone had already been switched off. That morning, when Calvin failed to appear for a scheduled meeting with federal investigators, a chain of events began that would shock even those who had been watching his tragic fall in real time. As the sun rose over Los Angeles on January 31st, 2023, no one knew what the day would bring. What had once been the story of a celebrated businessman's descent into scandal was about to become something even darker. Calvin Mara, once a symbol of success, discipline, and moral leadership, was about to be remembered for decisions that would change everything. What unfolded next would leave an indelible mark on his family, his community, and the city itself. The careful plans he had made, every desperate measure he had quietly prepared, were about to come to light, exposing just how far a man could fall when pride, fear, and mental illness collided. In the next 24 hours, the final chapter of Calvin Mara's once inspiring story would be written, a chapter that would haunt everyone who had ever known him. In the end, it wasn't the financial crimes, the infidelity, or even the public disgrace that would define Calvin Mara's legacy. It was what happened next, those dark hours between his final message and the first light of dawn, that would forever alter the lives of those connected to him. His downfall would become a cautionary tale about the devastating cost of maintaining appearances at any price. At exactly 7:43 a.m. on February 1st, 2023, a call came into LAPD dispatch. Lauren West, arriving for what she claimed was a scheduled breakfast meeting with Calvin, found the door to his downtown luxury apartment ajar. What she discovered inside would shock even the most seasoned first responders. Officer Maria Rivera, first on the scene, later described Unit 3901 at the Olympic Grand Residences as something out of a psychological thriller. Papers covered every surface, some tacked to walls, others scattered across the floor. Multiple laptops sat open, displaying international bank accounts and encrypted email services. The master bedroom had been converted into a sort of command center, its walls lined with maps, financial statements, and handwritten timelines. But it was the signs of violence that immediately raised alarm. A broken wine glass in the living room, overturned furniture, and blood spatter on the gleaming white Italian marble countertop pointed to a struggle. In the study, investigators found what appeared to be a makeshift shrine. Photographs of Calvin's family arranged in a circle, surrounded by Hindu religious items and handwritten notes, some in English, others in Hindi. Detective Alex Chong, who was assigned to lead the case, noted that the building's advanced security system had been disabled. This wasn't a random act, he later told reporters. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Indeed, security footage confirmed the system had been taken offline between 2:15 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., a window investigators would later call the critical hours. Forensics teams worked through the 2,800-square-foot apartment with meticulous care. Partial fingerprints were recovered from the wine glass, DNA samples from the blood spatter, and trace evidence suggested at least 3 individuals had been inside the unit during those hours. One laptop, still active when police arrived, displayed browser history that included searches for flights to Mexico and information about international border crossings. The reconstructed timeline painted a chilling picture. Security footage showed Calvin entering the building alone at 11:43 p.m. on January 31st. At 1:17 a.m., a man wearing a baseball cap and carrying a briefcase entered the building using Calvin's keycard. 30 minutes later, another similarly disguised figure followed. Then, at 2:15 a.m., the security system was manually disabled, a move digital experts would later confirm was a deliberate breach. Lauren's arrival that morning triggered a chain reaction that began to reveal the full scope of Calvin's final moves. In her statement to police, she said the breakfast meeting had been Calvin's idea. "He texted me late last night," she explained, said he had a solution to everything, that he needed to see me before the markets opened. He said he could fix it all. The FBI's cybercrime unit, led by digital forensics specialist Dr. Amanda Foster, began tracing Calvin's electronic activity. His devices showed a disturbing pattern: communications with offshore firms, encrypted messages arranging large fund transfers, and browser searches on how to vanish. Countries without extradition treaties, identity change methods, and private security services. The deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a man on the verge of collapse. This was a man who had spent weeks meticulously crafting his escape. But somewhere in that careful plan, something had gone terribly wrong. Calvin had systematically funneled millions through a complex web of shell companies. According to FBI financial analyst Robert Martinez, it was a sophisticated loop of transactions. Funds flowed from Tech Vision through a series of entities, eventually landing in untraceable cryptocurrency wallets. "We estimate approximately $30 million was diverted," Martinez explained. Witness testimony became essential in piecing together the events of that fateful night. A resident from the floor below reported hearing raised voices around 2 a.m. There was an argument in what sounded like Hindi, then English, the witness said. A man was shouting about betrayal. Then something heavy hit the floor. After that, silence. Marcus Thompson, the building's night security guard, provided critical insight into Calvin's mental state. Mr. Mara hadn't been himself for weeks, Thompson recalled. But that night, he seemed peaceful, almost too calm, given how agitated he'd been recently. "He told me to take care of my family. Said, family is everything." Looking back, it felt like he was saying goodbye. Evidence of premeditation continued to mount. Investigators discovered a storage unit, rented under a false name, containing a fully stocked go bag with $50,000 in cash, multiple burner phones, and several sets of identification. ATM security footage showed Calvin making maximum daily withdrawals over a period of several weeks. His recently updated will, found in his attorney's office, included surprising provisions, leaving assets to both Lauren and their unborn child. The investigation took a dramatic international turn on February 3rd, when Mexican authorities reported a potential sighting at a private airfield near Tijuana. A man matching Calvin's description had attempted to charter a flight to Guatemala. When questioned about documentation, he fled the scene in a black SUV. The tip launched an international manhunt. Interpol was alerted, borders were placed on high alert, and Calvin Mara's face was distributed to law enforcement agencies across North and Central America. His Indian passport had been flagged, but investigators believed he had access to alternative identification. The search concentrated on the Mexican border region after license plate readers confirmed that a vehicle registered to one of Calvin's shell companies had crossed into Mexico via the San Isidro port of entry. Working closely with U.S. law enforcement, Mexican authorities began monitoring hotels and private villas throughout Tijuana and Rosarito. On February 5th, the case broke open from an unlikely source. A small beachfront hotel in Ensenada reported a guest matching Calvin's description. He had paid in cash for a week-long stay and had been seen using multiple disposable phones. Staff noted he seemed increasingly paranoid and withdrawn. Mexican federal police, in coordination with U.S. Marshals, launched a pre-dawn raid on February 6th. Hotel security cameras captured the arrest. Gone was the confident CEO. In his place was a haunted man in wrinkled clothes and a 3-day beard. He offered no resistance. "I couldn't let them destroy everything," he said quietly in English. Footage of the arrest, later released to the media, showed this stark transformation. The once powerful executive who had commanded boardrooms and captivated audiences at industry conferences now walked with slumped shoulders, escorted by armed agents. The only remnant of his former life was the Patek Philippe gold watch still clinging to his wrist, a 25th anniversary gift from Elena. During initial questioning by Mexican authorities, Calvin spoke little. He confirmed his identity and requested to contact his U.S. legal team. But when told that Lauren had been the one to discover his abandoned apartment, his composure cracked. He demanded to know whether the package had been found. This prompted a second, more thorough search of the apartment. Inside a ventilation duct, investigators discovered a sealed envelope addressed to Lauren. Inside was a 20-page handwritten letter and several supporting documents that would prove vital in understanding the events of January 31st. Excerpts of the letter would later be read aloud in court. In it, Calvin described a man split between the life he built and the secrets he buried. "I built an empire on appearances," he wrote, "and in the end, those appearances destroyed everything real in my life." As Calvin Mera was extradited back to Los Angeles under heavy security, the full scope of his final plans began to surface. Investigators soon discovered that Calvin had intended to fake his own death, leaving behind a scene that suggested foul play while he escaped to Central America. The blood found in his apartment was, in fact, his own, painstakingly drawn over several days and strategically placed throughout the unit to simulate a violent end. Further investigation revealed that the two unidentified individuals seen entering the apartment that night were private security contractors, hired personally by Calvin. Their role was to help stage the crime scene and execute the escape plan. Their later cooperation with authorities proved critical, offering insight into Calvin's mental state and the intricate details of his exit strategy. Bank records traced a trail of funds dispersed across cryptocurrency wallets and offshore accounts. It was clear that Calvin had spent months, possibly even years, preparing for the possibility of flight. Multiple false identities have been established, each tied to financial resources in different countries. All this planning took place while he maintained his role as a respected tech mogul and continued his affair with Lauren. Upon his return to Los Angeles, Calvin appeared in court via video link from the Metropolitan Detention Center. The man once hailed as a symbol of success and leadership appeared a shadow of his former self, subdued, withdrawn, speaking only to acknowledge the charges. His attorney issued a brief statement, citing severe mental health deterioration and the overwhelming burden of maintaining appearances within both the business world and his cultural community. The picture painted by prosecutors was one of duality, a man who built an empire of wealth and reputation, all while secretly constructing a trapdoor to escape the very life he had created. Whether it was guilt, fear, or psychological collapse that caused him to abandon the plan and spiral towards self-destruction remained uncertain. As February 2023 progressed, the case continued to unravel, revealing new and increasingly disturbing details. Each revelation forced Calvin's family, his community, and the corporate world to question everything they once admired about him. His story, of brilliance overshadowed by deception, soon became a cautionary tale, particularly within immigrant and entrepreneurial circles. It was a stark reminder that the pressure to preserve a flawless image could drive even the most successful people to dangerous extremes. Though the investigation would continue for months, one image endured: Calvin Mera, handcuffed, being led through the courthouse. It was the enduring symbol of a fall from grace that shook not only Los Angeles, but also diaspora communities around the world. The trial began in September 2023 and drew intense media attention, far beyond the usual business press. The Los Angeles County Superior Court became a daily spectacle. Reporters, curious citizens, and onlookers lined up each morning, eager to witness the unraveling of a man once celebrated as a beacon of the American dream. District Attorney Rachel Martinez opened the prosecution with a searing statement. This is not just a story of financial fraud or infidelity. It is about a man who built an empire on trust and then systematically betrayed everyone who believed in him. Over 6 weeks, the prosecution laid out its case with methodical precision. Financial experts testified that Calvin had embezzled over $42 million through a labyrinth of shell companies and fraudulent invoices. Digital forensic specialists showed hundreds of altered documents and falsified board reports. Surveillance footage tied Calvin directly to the execution of his plans, leaving no doubt about the calculated nature of his deception. Lauren West's testimony proved particularly gut-wrenching. Now visibly pregnant, she described how Calvin had promised her a future, only to leave her as another expendable player in his larger scheme. Her detailed account of discovering the apartment that February morning and realizing the depths of his lies left the courtroom stunned. But it was Elena's testimony that moved many to tears. Speaking in a quiet but steady voice, she recalled watching the man she had loved for 26 years transform before her eyes. "He didn't just destroy our marriage," she said, pausing as her voice cracked. "He destroyed the foundation of everything we built together." She said he destroyed our children's faith in everything we taught them about honor, truth, and family. The defense, led by prominent attorney David Cohen, attempted to humanize Calvin Mara's actions. They brought in cultural experts who spoke about the immense pressures placed on successful immigrants. Dr. Prio's, a specialist in South Asian cultural psychology, testified about the concept of face in Indian society and the devastating psychological effects of public shame on individuals from such backgrounds. But it was the children's testimonies that exposed the deeper emotional wounds inflicted by their father's actions. Ryan, once proud to follow in his father's professional footsteps, spoke of the irreparable loss of respect for the man he had idolized. Paige described how her father's betrayal had made her question every cherished memory of her childhood. Maddie, the youngest, declined to testify in person, instead submitting a written statement. In it, she spoke of betrayal, confusion, and a lasting fracture of trust. After 3 weeks of deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Calvin Mara was found guilty on multiple counts of financial fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The judge, citing the calculated nature of the crimes and the egregious breach of fiduciary duty, sentenced him to 18 years in federal prison. The verdict marked the end of the legal proceedings, but only the beginning of the long shadow Calvin's actions would cast. Tech Vision Solutions, once a $500 million tech powerhouse, spiraled into crisis. Major clients withdrew. Business partners severed ties. The company's stock plummeted. Within months, the board voted to sell off the firm's assets to a competitor at a fraction of their original value. The Matra family's once sterling reputation, built on decades of community involvement and philanthropy, was irrevocably tarnished. The name that once stood for integrity now became a symbol of scandal. Elena legally reverted to her maiden name, Singh, marking a personal and public break from the past. The Indian community, stunned by the scandal, held several town hall meetings to reflect and respond. The India Cultural Center launched a mentorship program focused on ethical business practices and work-life balance, an initiative once inspired by Calvin himself. In the end, Calvin Mara didn't just lose his freedom, his fortune, or his family. He left behind a legacy of betrayal that sent shockwaves through the very community that once celebrated him. The fall of a man once seen as the gold standard of immigrant success forced Los Angeles's Indian-American community to re-examine its values. The relentless pursuit of status, perfection, and public approval came at a staggering cost. Families began asking themselves tough questions. What is success worth if it's built on secrecy, deception, and broken trust? and how many others are quietly drowning under the pressure to maintain a flawless image. Calvin's story has since become more than a tabloid tragedy. It's now discussed in ethics seminars, community town halls, and immigrant mentorship programs. South Asian organizations across the U.S. have launched new support systems for high-achieving professionals, focusing on mental health, work-life balance, and integrity in leadership. The lesson? No career, no wealth, no reputation is worth sacrificing the people who truly matter, or the principles that define who you are. If this story moved you or made you reflect, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more true crime stories, real-life scandals, and powerful life lessons from the world of business, family, and beyond. We have many more stories coming of people, choices, and the consequences that changed everything.